The title of my reflection this morning is Sanctuary Everywhere. And I have a couple of readings to begin with that I'd like to share with you this morning. The first is entitled Red Brocade by Naomi Shihab Nye. The Arabs used to say, when a stranger appears at your door, feed him for 3 days before asking who he is, where he's come from, where he's headed. That way, he'll have strength enough to answer. Or by then, you'll be such good friends, you don't care. Let's go back to that. Pine nuts, rice. Here, take the red brocade pillow. My child will serve water to your horse. No, I was not busy when you came. I was not preparing to be busy. That's the armor everyone put on to pretend they had a purpose in the world. I refuse to be claimed. Your plate is waiting. We will snip fresh mint into your tea. And the second reading this morning is less poetic, but powerful. This comes from a declaration of conscience that was a joint statement of the Unitarian Universalist Association and the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee in January of 2017. In part, it says, at this extraordinary time in our nation's history, we are called to affirm our profound commitment to the fundamental principles of justice, equity, and compassion, to truth and the core values of American society. In the face of looming threats to immigrants, Muslims, people of color, and the LGBTQ+ community, and the rise of hate speech, harassment, and hate crimes, we affirm our belief in the inherent worth and dignity of every person. We will oppose any and all unjust government actions to deport, register, discriminate, or despoil. As people of conscience, we declare our commitment to translate our values into action as we stand on the side of love with the most vulnerable among us. When I asked you earlier to think about what the word sanctuary means to you, what came up for you? What were the first images or feelings that came up for you? And I invite you to share some in the chat if you would. Safety, peaceful, safe assembly, peace, circling up together, a protected place, home, shelter from human storms, shelter, sacred space, a safe place to be vulnerable, peace, and the Carrie Newcomer song, which we'll hear actually in a little while. Nature, holding us in our vulnerabilities, safe space, a community of caring folks. So there's a lot about safety there, which I invite you to kind of wrestle with me this morning. Today, I want to invite us to think about sanctuary, not as a place, and maybe not even as a place of safety, but as a practice of solidarity. A practice of solidarity that we, as a Unitarian Universalist congregation, are uniquely called to embody. Every week when we light our chalice, we say, quote, "We remember its origin as a symbol of real sanctuary, and we recommit ourselves to being a place of life-saving welcome for all people, no exceptions." And for those of you who are newer in our community or might just need a reminder, I want to tell again really briefly, I know some of you all have heard this before, where the symbol of the flaming chalice came from in our Unitarian Universalist history. During World War II, the Unitarian, at that time, just Unitarian Service Committee was formed to give aid and shelter to those trying to escape the Nazis in Europe, including Jews, but also Unitarians and other targeted groups. They needed a symbol, a code to mark their communications and to indicate safe haven. An Austrian artist, Hans Deutsch, was on the run for drawing political cartoons that criticized Adolf Hitler. He was chosen to draw a symbol for the service committee and chose a chalice and a flame. A chalice symbolizing a healing cup, and the flame symbolizing a spirit of helpfulness and light. Later in the 20th century, congregations at the start of services began actually lighting a chalice, and that practice spread. While UU congregational practices can vary widely, and I'm sure our worship service this morning may be different from this usual service at the Universalist congregation in Essex that's joining us this morning. The lighting of the chalice, though, has become one common ritual among us. And it should be a ritual remembering our willingness to risk ourselves for others, to risk ourselves for love. And then often in our congregation, as we did this morning, we sing this song, and our version that we sing says, "Make us aware we are a sanctuary." Now, some of you may not know that this is an adapted version of a song co-written by Nashville bluegrass and country music legend Randy Scruggs, the son of Earl Scruggs. So it is definitely in the Southern vernacular, and some of you may have heard Randy Scruggs' version, perhaps in other congregations. The original goes, "Lord, prepare me to be a sanctuary, pure and holy, tried and true. With thanksgiving, I'll be a living sanctuary for you." Now, a UU minister adapted the words a bit to better fit, I think, our theology, but I think the core meaning remains the same. We are called by love to create a home for love in ourselves and in the world. Our congregation, no matter where we have met over the last 16 or so years of our existence in various forms. First, we met in small groups in homes and on the Maryville College campus as a Blount County satellite of the Tennessee Valley Unitarian Universalist Church. We have met at a senior center. We have met at the Smith Life Event Center, park pavilions, neighboring congregations, and of course, the last couple of years on Zoom. No matter where we have met over this journey, this congregation certainly has been a refuge for many of us, and even literally life-saving for some of us to find this community of faith. I know because I have heard many, many times from folks that to be able to be in a place where you can be your true self, where you can question the status quo, where you are among kindred spirits, where you feel safe, where you feel safety, that can be deep and real sanctuary. To have that kind of place to heal, to rest, to grow is important, and it is life-giving. And at next week's service, we'll be diving a little more deeply into creating that kind of metaphorical shelter for each other. And today, if we are only creating sanctuary for ourselves, for those who decide to come to our fellowship on a Sunday morning at 10 a.m., then we aren't listening to the call of love that is embodied in our faith tradition. If we aren't continually challenging ourselves to risk our safety on behalf of others, then we aren't a true safe sanctuary. We aren't practicing the kind of mobile sanctuary that the little girl in our story practiced this morning. Instead, we become a social club. Reverend Charles Grady was a UU minister who died in 2017 at the age of 91. In his writing just before his death, he wrote this, quote, "Our churches are clearings in the wilderness of this time. Our churches are places of refuge and sanctuary for the bruised and tired, and also places of healing and renewal. They are workshops for common endeavor, breaking barriers and building bridges. Churches," he says, "have a clear, strong, holy purpose, and it is more than intellectual stimulation. It is more than the relief of finding a tribe of others of like mind and resting easy in the relative comfort of homogeneity. It is more than friendship and socializing. It is more than self-expression or self-actualization. More," he says, "than anything with self in the hyphenated title." Please hear me this morning. Our own needs for care, for nurture, for healing, for self-actualization, for shelter and sanctuary might be what brings us to this fellowship. It's a really important thing. But once we experience that gift, if we are not passing it on to others, like the little girl with the umbrella, then we are not creating a true sanctuary. We are not living up to our own vision to be a model of radical love in this community. As Jewish and Christian teachings say over and over and over again, we are called to welcome the strangers among us. In Exodus 22:21, "Do not mistreat or oppress a foreigner, for you were foreigners in Egypt." I invite you to think of that word foreigner in a very wide and expansive way, not just non-US citizens. And in, of course, Matthew 25, "For I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. I was naked and you gave me clothing. I was sick and you took care of me. I was in prison and you visited me. Truly, I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these who are members of my family, you did it to me." Or simply consider the words of contemporary Palestinian poet Naomi Shihab Nye. "The Arabs used to say, when a stranger appears at your door, feed him for 3 days before asking who he is, where he's come from, where he's headed. That way, he'll have strength enough to answer." This morning, I thought about going into a deep statistical dive about the housing crisis here. and across this country. But I don't think I have to tell you all about the statistics. What I do want to do very briefly is share with you just a few short stories that are drawn from real lives in our community. They're little vignettes. A 19-year-old transgender person moves from couch to couch to couch because their parents will no longer provide any support for them due to their identity, and they can't find affordable and safe housing. A senior widow on a fixed income has lived in the same rental house for 30 years, and she comes to the Office on Aging seeking any help she can find because her landlord has realized he can capitalize on this wild housing market and decides to sell that home out from under her. She has to move and she has nowhere to go. An immigrant mom lives in a rental trailer infested with bugs, with holes in the floor, but has no recourse really to pursue with the landlord, even if she were a citizen of this country. There is very, very little our local government does here to enforce any kind of rental housing standards. And I know a high school teacher who took a student to the doctor during his planning period and paid for it out of his own pocket when the student showed up to school with a serious untreated injury, showed up to school because that is where he will get fed, and the family can't afford food and rent, let alone a hospital bill. I know a person with stage 4 cancer who is afraid of being evicted from her mobile home because she can't work, which means she can't pay the rent. And so she tries to find work cleaning houses, even though she is in constant pain. Each one of you could probably add your own stories. The hardship is great. The challenges are multiplying. We are called to pay attention and to respond. In our opening words this morning by Steve Garnes Holmes, he wrote, "The temple, the sanctuary, isn't here or there. It isn't in a place. It isn't a thing. It is empty space. It is the love between us. It is not something that is, but something that happens." This congregation already knows in its DNA the meaning of these words. You already know that we are the sanctuary, no matter where we are or where we're physically gathering. You already have had years of experience being an umbrella sanctuary, like the one in our wisdom story this morning, a mobile sanctuary, a sanctuary that passes protection from one to another. Members of this congregation are working to create a sanctuary on July 30th, when a very public pride celebration will be happening right in downtown, thanks in part to our congregation's support. We have been passing along the gifts of life through the Lyles Farm Gardening Project as we use our budget to support that work, and many volunteers from this congregation help plant, grow, and harvest the produce that all gets donated to our local food bank. And the board just recently approved a proposal to create a special fund to provide direct, consistent housing support to one family at a time, so that at least one family can find some stability for themselves and their children. It may seem small, given the challenges our wider community faces, but for one family, it is a huge difference that it can make. And I want to say we'll hear more about this proposal briefly during our invitation to the offering and in the weeks to come, but this proposal grew organically out of the relationship our accompaniment team has been investing in and nurturing. We are being changed and expanded by these relationships. Now, as you all know, in a few weeks, I'll be departing as your minister. And I said to you in my message this week, we have so much to celebrate about our 10 years of shared ministry with one another. And I'm also taking this opportunity over the next few weeks to leave you with my challenges. Today's challenge is for this congregation to say boldly and proudly and publicly that you are a houseless congregation, one that creates sanctuary everywhere. That is who we are. That is who we have been. We are a congregation that asks first, how can we grow more love here? The need is so great, friends. You know this. And I'm afraid that it will be getting greater over the years to come. We are small as a congregation. If you look at our numbers of people, but we have incredibly rich resources of money, of time and talent, of commitment, of community relationships and credibility, and most especially of deep, deep love. Love for each other and love for life and open-heartedness to people in our community. So as we continue to gather for worship and service and fellowship, no matter where it is, may we offer rest and repair, connection and comfort. May we offer opportunities to risk. May we find our center, our breath, join our voices in sharing what we have found here with others, calling up the strength to go out into the world and pass on this sanctuary wherever it is needed. May it be so, and amen.